Well, what are we always doing in sales, right? We're helping somebody do something that may be difficult for them to make the decision to do, but they really want to.
Welcome to the Measure Success podcast, where we feature top leaders on how they measure success in their business and life. Now, let's learn from their experiences.
Carl J. Cox here, host of the Measure Success podcast, where we talk with top leaders about effective strategies that inspire success. This episode is brought to you by 40 Strategies built to make strategy work for small to medium-sized businesses and organizations by helping them design world-class strategic plans, but more importantly, keeping them accountable to actually get it done. To learn more, go to 40strategy.com. Also excited about our book, Lost at CEO, which has been launched and released. It is available on all of your major, you go Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and you can even pick it up on Audible. Sorry, it's not my voice. And from there, I'm very excited to talk about our guest today. Nicole and I had a awesome, and we go by Nick, her short name here, is we had one of the best prep calls like I've ever had with anybody. And so I was super excited that we are finally doing this. She is a sales coach, trainer, and speaker who helps women make more money, which is important, right, in their business by mastering sales conversations using human connection, sales psychology, and magic phrases. Nick, welcome to the Measure Success podcast.
Thank you for having me, Carl. I'm excited to be here because, to your point, our convo the last time was a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to this.
Absolutely. So you had a really cool beginning, very different typical career path. You were a teacher, a 15-year high school math teacher. Tell us what happened next. How in the heck did you change from being a math teacher to what you're doing today as a sales coach?
I didn't necessarily have it all planned out. I think a lot of us can look back at our life and see that it was a little bit less of a straight line than we thought it might be. And that was the case for me. I had done it for a long time. I came from a family of teachers. So that was just kind of the natural next step. And after probably at about the 12 or 13 year mark, I was like, I don't think that I want to do this anymore. And I'm a really competitive person. I played sports my whole life. I played basketball in college. And I think I was ready to challenge myself. I like challenges and I really like competition. And I had a lot of friends in sales and it sounded like a game to me. And, I had all the limiting beliefs around it. Like, how could I do that? What if I'm no good at it? I can't take the pay cut and I get my summers off and I live at the beach. There were all these reasons why making the move just didn't seem logical or like the right decision. And so like I said, it took me a few years to finally get the courage to do it. And I had a friend through kind of divine, connection that said, hey, I'd hire you. I think you'd be great. And I went on my first interview and I did not end up getting that job. But what happened in that interview is the guy said the thing that I was so afraid he was going to say, because my resume, Carl, just said teacher. Right? I had a resume going in there that just said teacher. I had no experience. And so I'm sitting there in front of him and he said, listen, I am pleasantly surprised. I think he just did the interview as a favor. He said, I am pleasantly surprised. You knocked this out of the park. I'm going to have a hard time though, hiring you over the 89 internal people who want this position because your resume just says teacher. You've never sold anything. And I was like, oh man, shot to the heart. Like that's the thing I was so afraid he was going to say, right? And I said, well, I've been selling math to high school teenagers for 15 years and nobody wanted to buy that. And in that moment, he looked at me and he goes, oh, you're good. That is good. And I didn't have that plan, Carl. That just came through me. And what it did in that moment is it moved me on to the next round. Because then he said, will you do a 30, 60, 90-day business plan? I said, yeah. And he said, will you go on a ride along with one of my guys? I said, absolutely. But what it does years later for me, every time I remember that story, every time I share that story, it reminds me we are all selling something. No matter what we do, no matter what we consider ourselves to be, we are all in the business of selling something. And what it really taught me is sales is not transactional. It's relational. Everything about what I was doing in that math classroom was selling, but there was no transaction. Those kids weren't walking in there with a credit card. They certainly wouldn't have paid me to be there because they didn't want to be there, right? So how was I helping them make a decision to do something that was good for them, that they needed to do, but they didn't necessarily want to do or felt like it was challenging to do? Well, what are we always doing in sales, right? We're helping somebody do something that may be difficult for them to make the decision to do, but they really want to. And so that's really where it started. I wanted to challenge myself, and I thought, let me just try this out. Like I said, I got an interview. I didn't get that job, but I went to another friend shortly thereafter. I said, hey, I just interviewed for a sales job. And he looked at me and he goes, what do you mean? I said, you've always told me I'd be great at sales. So I went and interviewed for a job. He goes, I don't want you to get a sales job. I want you to work for me. So he ended up hiring me, and I had one goal, and it was to be number one in the nation. And so I left my 15-year teaching career and jumped into the corporate sales world and made that happen. I became number one, and I really leaned into exactly what I knew it was all about, which was relationships. And I made that my priority at all times. How do I build relationships with people and help them do something that they weren't able to do on their own?
There's like so many things I want to touch on this, and because that beginning story is it's a wow. I mean, you can't understate what you did. 15-year high school math teacher. I'm going to say something that's going to be. My oldest daughter's a teacher. I love teaching. I almost became a teacher. But one of the problems in teaching is that you end up often feel stuck because of the pension related pieces around it, right? And so you get caught into this. I need to do this for the rest of my life. This is who I am. This is my identity. I can't do anything different. And you took that massive leap, right? A massive leap of oh crap. Like I am going to do, you probably said some different words, right? But hey, we've got to I'm going to completely change all of my comfort, all of my foundation, everything what I know, my family, right? If you may, in some way, you're rebelling against them, right? Because that is your heritage and that's what you have. But something you said there in the very beginning, going back to, is that two things. One, you were selling something all the time. But I think the thing you hit so importantly is you were selling by relationship rather than transactional. And I'll go and say it. I'll just call it out. Grant Cardone, who I think is, a crazy, amazing human being, right? In terms of what he's been able to accomplish.
Yeah.
I've been to a 10X conference in Miami beforehand. It was a blow away event, and I've read many of his books. But his concept is, who's got my money, right? That's one of his big things. Who's got my money? That is not relational, except for the fact that he wants to get it from you, right? It feels right, even though he has all the verbiage and all the words and all the things to make you believe it's about being your friend. At the end of the day, it's about the transaction, versus what you were doing is focusing on the relationship and dare I say, giving people a gift, right, of the service or product that you had. So if there are salespeople listening right now, how do you get people to change that mentality that it's an and, not an or, when it comes to selling?
Well, I believe selling is serving. First and foremost, that's my motto. Selling is serving, right? People want to, depending on what you're selling, they want to buy a better version of themselves. They want to buy a better quality of life. They want to buy a better experience. They actually do want to part with their money. They just have to understand what's on the other side of that. When price comes out before value, then they see it as price. When value comes out before price, they're like, I want that. And they will give you their money, right? And so I think, and listen, going back to the Grant Cardone, there's nothing wrong with wanting money and wanting more of it, because at the end of the day, to help more people, we have to stay in business, and money is what does that, right? And getting people to part with their money is can have some wonkiness for people, right? Because they can see it. Like I have clients come to me all the time. They're like, I don't want to take people's money. I'm like, then stop. Why are you taking people's money, right? There's an energetic exchange. And so if you truly see selling as serving, and you understand that what they are receiving in exchange is not only worth that money, it's worth way more than that, then you'll understand that, first of all, if you really do care about the results, those who pay attention. If you really want somebody to achieve those results, then getting them to make that investment is actually conditional on how successful they will be with those results. And if you don't believe me, try giving some things away for free and see how that works out for you.
It's so, and I love, once again, there's so many different layers, right, of once again, of what you're saying. And I remember my first decade was as a bean counter, right? And I say that in the most loving way. I became a CFO by the age of 30, and I remember being a CFO, working one of the best, I would say my best leader manager I ever had in my life, Jerry Ramey. There was a deal that happened. We had extraordinarily high integrity, extraordinarily high values, and one of our biggest competitors won a deal from us because they only charged $50 for installation. he felt that lacked integrity. He's like, there's no way they could do it for $50. Well, what they really did is they just moved things around. They kept their price high, right?
Yep.
And they just subsidized the price of the product to help pay for the installation. So I shared that sales tactic that they did. And he called me, he got so mad. He called me a used salesperson. And that for him was the ultimate insult he could provide to anybody. He's like, that is being a used car. And he's like, I'm never going to be that. We gave our competition $500,000 in margin, right? Now, I'm not talking about gross value. That doesn't matter. We gave him $500,000. Like, is that what you wanted? And he was not happy with me. But sure enough, we changed our ways. We looked at the total package of how we're doing things. And often where we're trying to get at here is our own internal sabotaging, right? Of I can't sell, or I can't sell a certain way, or I can't say this in a different way. And it's a belief, and some believe it to be true. And it's only true because you determine it to be true, right? It's not actually true in many, many cases. It's an enlightenment. You coach people. This is part of what you do now. You're a sales coach. You're helping women, right, figure out. And I can imagine probably even a little bit more so for women than men, they really get caught up in this, just you said, of I feel bad making money. They even feel bad about making money. Never mind, quote unquote, taking money from someone.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start there. How do you help an aspiring entrepreneur who is afraid, like literally afraid of a transaction of making more money for themselves, right? And then that process of taking. I know there's two separate things there, but help us with that first thing. How do you get somebody to recognize that it's not bad to be a capitalist, to make money?
Well, the first question I would ask is, I mean, there's, like you said, there's so many layers. There's so many ways we could go with this, right? Why are you making it about you? You're so focused on how you feel that what you're actually doing is, and it's none of your business, but you're taking away the right that somebody has to make a decision. You're acting like it's up to you. Like, I feel bad taking their money, so I'm not going to ask. I'm not going to offer. You're denying them the opportunity to make a decision, an empowered decision. You're acting like they don't have agency to make wise decisions for themselves. Like, who died and put you in charge and said that you're all of a sudden the person who gets to say yes or no where people spend their money? Right? Why are we making it about us? It's the same thing I say to people when they're like, I feel salesy. I'm like, how do you think the people feel that need your help? They're in pain. They're suffering. They need somebody right now to help them from where they are to where they want to be. And you're so busy worried about how you feel about the whole situation that you're not putting yourself out there to help people. So now you're denying yourself of the very thing you said is important to you, which is helping people. And you're denying other people of the very thing that they have every right to do, which is to make a decision about where they want to put their money. If they don't want to put it with you, they won't. They have agency. They can make their own decision. They're a responsible adult. You're not strong arming them into anything. And if you are, and if you're trying to, then let's have a separate conversation, because that's a whole different topic, right? But where do you think you have all this power all of a sudden to say yay or nay, where somebody else gets to choose how to spend their money? So you can see I get a little fired up about it, but it's like, I feel like, and that's one of the first things I would say. And second, is it important to you to help people? Yes. Then how are you going to keep doing that if you're not willing to create an exchange so that you can receive money and keep yourself in business and keep doing this? Because otherwise, what you're going to have to do is stop your business and go back to working for somebody else. Because if you feel guilty having your own business and receiving money for the work that you do and the value you put in the world, then you're going to go work for somebody else and cut yourself off from helping the people with the very gift that God gave you to help people with. Tell me how that makes sense.
There was a book I remember reading, and by the way, this is far down my career. I started out on free and reduced lunch. I mean, I was in poverty a good part of my life growing up, and then got to what you may call, whatever you want to call it, middle class. And I remember reading a book, Business Brilliant, and it blew me away because I had all of these, what I call these, for lack of a better term, middle class beliefs. I'm not calling truths, I'm calling them beliefs. And these beliefs were holding me back from more opportunity. They were holding back my family from more opportunity. They were holding back how I can help provide, right? So that's one key thing. So once again, there's a belief thing. Secondly, I love it how you talk about it's not your decision whether they buy. It is the customer's decision whether they buy. And you know this very well, and I know this. This is what you control is the leading indicators. You control the things that you can do to encourage them or to give them information, but you're not pressing the button or handing the cash over. It's them who are doing it. And so it's so fascinating to me when we have an outcome goal of sales, it's you can't technically control the outcome. You can just control of your actions, relationship, touch points, right? With a customer. That's what you can control. And that's what we need to spend our time focusing on.
Yeah, your job is to influence a conversation in a way that really truly supports the other person, and not to influence it on your own agenda, but to truly take the time, ask questions, find out if it's the right thing for them, help them see that it's the right thing for them, and then help them make a decision. We're just professional mind maker uppers. That's really what we are as salespeople, right? How do you show up and ethically influence a conversation and then help someone make up their mind to do the thing that they are really telling you that they want to do?
Now, I'm going to not try to backtrack in this, but I do on what I was saying earlier, but you said something important, which is ethical. Mm-hmm. I remember getting a book one time and somebody gave it to me and they said, use this for good and not for evil. I was literally working for a mental health organization. And it was a bunch of it was all master's level clinicians on site. And so they knew the mind and influence and persuasion more than anyone. And literally gave me this book and it talked about a lot of principles that you can influence people by how you do things. And this is the salesperson thing of where you come in and you didn't want to buy the car and you end up buying it anyways, right? Because of the, if you may, at times, right, can be how they actually persuaded you in a way which wasn't healthy, right? Where you do feel wrong afterwards. There's such a subtle difference between that, what I call doing it for good and not doing it for evil, right? Like you literally have to have the right intent behind making sure that the customer is getting what they need, right? Helping them to understand this is going to be the most powerful thing for you. So I want to dive into this, like the meat and potatoes of selling for a moment, right? You're a sales coach and you're getting through the mental compartment. That's a big challenge of this, right? It's just like literally mentally you can do it. Mentally, it's not about you. Now the next part is let's get in some nuts and bolts behind how to, right? Yeah. So when you're working with and you're coaching your clients on how to sell better, what type of things, quote unquote, should they be tracking, doing consistently to be more successful?
Things as in the sales conversations themselves or in lead generation or?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm more going down that path of like lead generation, the process, whether it's managing a pipeline, sales pipeline, that type of stuff, because so many people aren't familiar with those concepts and they just think sales happen by putting a post on Instagram. Yeah. Right. And that's not how most things work. Yeah. It's not how most things work.
If only.
So, yeah, if only. Exactly. So help us through that. Help those who don't understand. I'm sure there's those who do understand. I'm sure they're going to be curious about what you have to say. Is what are the 2 or 3 things you think are the most important pieces of the sales opportunity, right? To help a customer, a person to come in and actually say, you're right, I do want to buy that.
I think the first sale will always start with us, meaning you have to be sold on yourself. If you're not convinced, you can't convince. If you don't believe it, nobody else will, right? So your own self-talk, it has to start there. What are you connected to? What do you believe? And if you're not working on that every single day, you shouldn't be surprised that things are a little wonky in how your results are looking, right? We've got to be that first line of understanding that the first sale is always going to be us. And I think that there's nothing more important than the way we talk to ourselves. And that has a lot to do with then how we communicate to others. So I would say mindset wise, you got to get yourself right. You got to be sold on what you're selling and the value of what you sell. And a lot of that also has to do with the second thing I'll say, which is, do you know who you're selling to and why it's valuable for them? Right. I recently did a reel on Instagram where I was talking about, hey, if Mercedes dealerships are not sitting around in their meetings trying to figure out how to get more Honda customers to walk through their door.
That's awesome.
They're not trying to figure, well, gosh, 800 people just went and bought Hondas today. How can we get them to? No, and there's nothing wrong with who wants to choose a Honda. There's nothing wrong with who wants to choose Mercedes. There's nothing wrong with anyone's decision. But are you marketing to the people who actually see value in what you have? Because if the Mercedes dealership, if those salespeople, since we're talking about, car sales a little bit, if they were talking about how to help those Honda people see the value, they're not going to see the value. Those people are looking more for function, point A to point B. There's a different type of customer that's going to walk into a Mercedes dealership and they're looking for something different. They're looking for a little bit higher level customer service, right? Oh, they get a car that they get loaned to them if something happens to theirs, and then it just gets fixed while they're driving the loaner car, right? Anyways, there's a different set of value pieces that those people are looking for. So do you know who you're talking to? Do you know what their wants and needs are? Not just needs, but their wants, right? Because I think one of the most valuable things we can remember is go where you're wanted, not where you're needed, right? Because if you were to be selling Mercedes and you're like, yeah, but those people need cars too. Okay. At the end of the day, no matter what brand of car you're selling, they all serve the same function. But be very clear, because value is not what you offer, it's what people perceive.
Amen to that. I'm cracking up. I'm still cracking up about the Mercedes examples. Like, how many Honda Civics do you see sit next to a Mercedes in the driveway? Right. Yeah,
Not many.
just doesn't happen. Right. Yeah. Not many. Unless it's like the kids hand me down type thing, from they bought, as opposed to handing down their older Mercedes. Right. And they probably wouldn't even want it right in their driveway. It's, and so, yeah, you're right.
Different person.
Right. Knowing.
No judgment either way. Nobody's wrong in this. It's just, what are they for and what do they see value in? And are you marketing to them?
That's right. Yeah, I love it. These are great examples. There's not a right and wrong. Now, my dad would say there's a right and wrong in that because he only bought beater used cars, right? So, so he'd be like, my dad would go, that is wrong. But there isn't by definition a right or wrong in it, and so, I love that part around it. So, outside of the things you've already talked about, what do people in the process of trying to, once again, build up a sales pipeline, build up confidence in what they're doing, what's the thing that typically trips them up the most?
They're embellishing. Yes. I think people try too hard to sell what they're trying to sell. And listen, there's some, I guess I'll use the word controversy. I think there's some controversial opinions around, should you market to pain points? Should you sell to pain points? But the bottom line is, it's human nature. We are always going to work harder to avoid pain than we will to seek pleasure. And I think too often people are embellishing what their offer looks like. They're embellishing their solution instead of eliminating no as an option. And when we eliminate no, what choice do people have than to move from where they're at? When we help them understand that they don't want to be where they are anymore. Because here's the thing, most people have normalized where they are because they're there. On some level, they've made it okay to be where they are because they're there. So how do we help them see that, oh, maybe I'm not that comfortable here. Maybe I actually don't want to be here, right? Change is hard for people. What are you doing when you're selling something? You're asking someone to change. And the bottom line is, Carl, we all know things right now that we could be doing that would make our lives better. We all know things that we could be. I got home last night. I had a networking event. It was a little late. I came home. I sat on my couch and I was like, whoa, it would feel a lot better right now if I just got up and put my pajamas on and washed my face. But it just feels so good to stay here right now. Right. And it was so much easier just to stay where I was. I was comfortable. I was fine, but I knew I'd feel better and it would get me ready for bed sooner. And I'd probably go to bed on time if I actually got up and did it then. We all have something like that right now. Many things right now in our life that we could be doing that would improve our life, but we're not, because it's okay to stay where we are. Right. So how are we allowing people to stay stuck, and where are we willing to take a stand for people and help them realize, whether we're in a direct conversation with them, we're marketing to them, we're putting something on social media that they're reading, are we helping them create an awareness around the pain that they're in? And I think pain awareness is one of the strongest ways to grab people's attention, because it's like, ooh, right? Maybe I'm not okay where I am. So again, what quite often happens is we're just trying to make this other thing look really good, but what it looks like is a nice to have.
Right. Yeah, it is. status quo is one of the hardest things to move from, once again, that just being comfortable. I'm pulling out my phone here for those who aren't watching right now, but this phone in my hand, right, is made us too comfortable in so many different ways. Now it makes us uncomfortable in many different ways too, which we know about that. We know about the stories of it actually makes things worse in more cases than it makes it better. But we're busy, right? We're busy and we're comfortable just pulling up, your favorite Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, if it's still going to be available by the time this recording comes out. There are these things that that we go back to, and it becomes then a habit for us, right? Once again, of how we end up creating pain and trials and tribulations. So I love that. Okay, this is when we have too much fun, Nick, and we got to move on to some of the key core questions I love to ask all my guests. So, first of all, in your business, how do you measure success?
That's such a relevant question for me right now because it's really shifted over the past, I would say, year and a half to 2 years, because it was always numbers. That's how I measured everything, is through numbers, right? I'm a competitive person. I like to chase the carrot. And and when I say numbers specifically, it was revenue and money. And I've had a lot of success in my life, fortunately. And what I started to realize is, even going back to corporate America, when I was in my corporate job, like I did become number one in the nation, and I did that for a few years in a row. And after my second year, I was like, why aren't the angels singing? Where are the fireworks? I thought fireworks would be going on. I thought I thought there would be different feelings that I would have. And I started to understand that I was waiting for something outside of me to make me feel a certain way, right? I was chasing the external. And then I started my coaching business, and then I left that corporate job, and then I achieved all this success in my coaching business, and it was almost like the exact same thing but in a different way, right? Same horse, different color. And I was like, wait, why don't these numbers fulfill me and make me feel good? And I started to realize that my definition of success is going to continue to, I'm going to be on that hamster wheel forever, because when is it actually going to be enough? So going back to what we said earlier, yes, I love money. Yes, I want to keep making it because I want to keep doing what I'm doing. And I believe good people do good shit with money. So when the good people of the world are open and willing to receive more money, we're going to make this world a better place. So in no way am I saying the numbers, the money isn't important, but it can't ever be as important as some of the other things that I started to realize you can't really measure. And it's, who are the people in my life and what are the experiences in my life that actually make my life my life? And am I giving myself the opportunity to really do that more? And that's how I measure success now, is how much time am I actually getting to spend doing the things that matter the most to me with the people that matter the most to me? Because if that's not the case, then nothing, no number in the world is ever going to bring me any level of true success and true fulfillment.
You and I, when we had our prep call, we got a little bit emotional because I think part of what you had and happened earlier in my life is we each lost somebody that was really important to us, and it gave us a different view of the world, right? If you wouldn't mind, share. You don't have to go deep into this, but just tell maybe briefly what happened, and then how was it, that or what other things, other than the fact that you realized once you have a certain amount of money, you weren't any happier, right? You recognize that, you learned it multiple times, right? You hit it, you did it, just like I said. Okay, it didn't change other than the fact that your bank account was bigger, right? And so tell us about that eye-opening experience that really, I think it's really had an impact on who you are today.
Big time. Yeah. And to your point, all the money in the bank didn't actually change me. It actually made me feel more sad, I think, to realize that that wasn't the answer, right? I trust me, I wish that it was. I wish that that was just the thing, right? That would have made me feel the way that I was looking to feel, because I would have felt that way already. And so when I didn't have anything, right? And I had the list of things that I knew were going to make me happy, I thought I was sad then. I thought I was, whatever. And then when I accomplished all those things and I was doing everything and people were looking at me going, "Oh my God, you did it. You're living the dream." And I didn't feel like I was living the dream. That was a huge disconnect. So it actually, money just enhanced more of who I already was, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, to your point, it's like all of the accumulation, all the money, it's like, wait, I'm not feeling that way. And so the story that I'll share is about a year and a half ago. And this is why I say it was about a year and a half ago that I started to measure success differently. I was stuck, right? I didn't want to keep doing things the way I'd been doing them, but I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And I was at a place where, I don't know, it's easy to stay, but I don't want to stay. And I got on a call with my therapist, who is very much a therapist, a spiritual teacher. He was so many things to me. He wore so many hats. And I'd been seeing him for a very long time, probably 7 years at that point. And like he had helped me get sober. Like there were a lot of things, right? A lot of life things that I had been through with this man. And he knew me really well. And he was also very much a pattern interrupter for me, right? Meaning he was like my own personal Tony Robbins. He was going to tell it like it was and tell me what I needed to hear. So I get on a call with him and I said, "Hey, I'm stuck." He said, "What do you mean?" I'm stuck, Kevin. I don't know what to do. I'm stuck. He said, "Nick, you're stuck because you want to be stuck. And when you get tired of your own shit, you'll get unstuck." And I just kind of sat there and looked at him. And I mean, I know what he was saying was true, but I'm like, but dude, I'm like legit stuck, right? And he said, "Nick, there's nobody coming to save you. There's no knight in shining armor, and there's no happily here and now. Or I'm sorry, there's no happily ever after. There's just happily here and now. And if you don't get that, you're fucked." And I just looked at him and I was like, tears pouring out of my eyes. I was like, "I'm going to write that down and then we're going to talk about it." And it really did bring me to my knees in certain ways because I'm like, "Oh my God, happily here and now, happily here and now. That's it. The present moment is all we really have. And what am I actually doing if I'm not living in the present?" And, I can't say I got off that call feeling unstuck. I still was playing victim and I still was kind of feeling sorry for myself. But I started to really think about it a lot. And I started to repeat that story a lot. And I actually created the Instagram handle for Happily Here and Now, right? Eventually. And I started to realize that my definition of success needs to shift. And he was one of the most profound, impactful people in my entire life. And I say was because 6 years after that, or 6 months after that conversation, he passed away very unexpectedly. He was young. He wasn't, it wasn't one of those things where it was like, oh, did not expect it at all. And, at the time I was like, dude, you didn't need to die to teach me that lesson. Like I promise you I was learning it. And in many ways, he's still here with me. But that was one of the most valuable things that I ever could remember about that. And that's why I say my definition of success really shifted because there's no money in the bank that could ever fulfill me the way that just living in the present moment and appreciating what we have and who we are and who's in our life will always do for us.
Yeah, I love that. And what I love about this question, usually I start out with this, how you measure success in your business life, and we talk about habits and then going in your personal life, but it's one and the same for you now. And I think often when the more, I can't, this is an always statement, but often when people have reached, once again, where they by definition don't have to continue to make significant more money, right? It's they're taken care of, if you may, or in some cases never have to work a day again in their life, but they still are. But they've combined often that it's more about the impact on the people, right, around them. And once again, yourself, of like living in the present moment, right? Being happy now. It's you can get to, once again, you have had truly so many extraordinary milestones. And you should, by the way, smile because you have done a great job. You have done extraordinary accomplishments. You went from being a teacher, right? If you may, a starving teacher, so to speak, right?
Sure.
To a very successful business person and now a business coach, right? To help out other people. Those are not easy transitions that you've moved into, but you have, once again, been able to find truly meaning in that transition. And that's, I think, the wow moment. That's why, once again, why I love to have this podcast, to help enlighten people to see, hey, don't stop trying to be great, but be great in the moment, right? And be great with the people around you. And we're all, none of us are ever perfect with this, but when we go back and reflect, hey, was today a 10? And measure that in so many different ways. And was it a 10? When we could start saying it's a 10 in the relationship to the people around us. And boy, I'm far from that, just to clarify. I mean, I got so far to go to call myself having a 10 every single day, but that's a super powerful thing. What is a book that has been, and I know, once again, you're using a certified guide. Why don't you mention that? and then maybe another book that has been really inspirational for you.
Yeah, so for sure, let's talk about exactly what to say, because anybody who's listening who wants to get better at their sales conversations, I would highly recommend reading this little book. It's super short. It's actually the number one listened to book on Audible. Yeah. And so I think it's under an hour to listen to it. It's actually the number one repeatedly listened to. So people listen to it multiple times because it's just full of 23 phrases that are just really incredible in improving your ability to influence your conversations. So that's definitely made a huge impact on my life, not just professionally, not just in my sales conversations, but it's helped me stay more curious in all of my conversations in life, which I believe leads to better connection and leads to more fulfillment. If I had to name, I believe readers are leaders. There's so many books that I could name. I think one of the most impactful ones for me in terms of up leveling my wealth consciousness and understanding, you said when you get to a point and you've made enough money that you're taken care of, that more money coming in isn't something that's going to necessarily improve your life per se. It becomes more about legacy and impact and mattering, right? How do I matter in this world? And I think that when we start to understand that that's really what this is all about, we start to show up differently in life. I'm trying to think of the book that's probably made the biggest impression on me, but in terms of wealth consciousness, I would say the first one that I read that really blew me away was called You're a Badass at Making Money. And paired very closely with that, which a lot of the concepts are from this other book, The Science of Getting Rich. So You're a Badass at Making Money is written by Jen Sincero. And again, a lot of the concepts she talks about in her book are from The Science of Getting Rich. And it's really about just understanding how to have a higher level of wealth consciousness. That was a term that I didn't even know before I read that book. But understanding that when we change our relationship with money and when we understand that, like, we're worth, first of all, receiving money and using it in ways that light us up, right? Like you, I came from a home where it was, you don't spend the money, you save it. And you don't buy a new car, you buy an old beater and you drive it till it dies. And there were a lot of things that I started to understand about my own worthiness with using money on myself. Maybe using isn't the right word, to
But spending on yourself, right? Yeah. Like,
myself, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
worth that, because ultimately what happens is, number one, I'm circulating money and more starts to come my way, right? There's a flow to money. And when we get weird and wonky and static with it and we keep it in a certain place, it's no different than keeping a glass of water there and not moving it. It's like water gets gross and murky, right? And so how do we understand that we're worth not only spending it on ourselves, but receiving it and getting in the flow? And that book really shifted things for me, because I believe when we up level our wealth consciousness, we become better business people, because we understand God gave us these gifts. God gave us these gifts and these talents, and we are not meant to squander them away. And to the degree that we sit around feeling unworthy and like, oh, I don't know, who am I to help people? And what if people don't want to buy? No, 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 no. You were put on this earth to make that impact, to build that legacy, to matter to people. And there's 8 billion people on the planet, and you're not going to matter to all of them necessarily. But there are a lot of people that their lives could be improved if you show up in your authentic way that God wanted you to show up. And maybe you don't believe in whatever you believe in, you were put on this earth to share who you are in a bigger way. And it goes back to what you and I were talking about earlier, Carl, before we started recording. When you show up like that in your zone, in your authentic, most genuine way of being a human, because there's nobody else like you, things just start to align and flow. And I know that seems a little like fluffy maybe at times, but it's so true.
It is true, and it's really fun when you get there. I'm super grateful, and it's interesting because I would say if you asked me 3 years ago, I'd be like, I'm exactly where I want to be, and it's interesting. I'm like, oh, I'm getting closer to exactly where I want to be. It's like because I'm finding even better ways to help make a difference, right? And so it's exciting, right? And that I think is the hard part for a lot of people, is like we get, once again, content, right? It's such a dangerous thing. We get content with where we're at, status quo.
Complacent.
It's good enough, right? It's good enough. And it's like, well, why not be better? We have such a short period of time here. And so why not be better? And why not do the best we can? And so I love so much. Nick, how can people connect and learn more about you?
I would love to connect on Instagram with anyone who would like to get to know me. If there's any way I can support you, I certainly have some free resources I'd be happy to share around great questions to ask in your sales conversations. So I'm on Instagram at the Nicole Cramer.
That's right. So once again, go to that. All that information will be on our website. You can go to that as well as on the Measure Success podcast, wherever channel you're getting it from. Nick, thank you so much for being guest on the Measure Success podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Carl. I appreciate it. This was fun.
It's been super fun. And to everyone else who's listening, I once again hope you have enjoyed this. I hope you go out and rate our show. That is my ask for you today. If you like this show, go out and share it with somebody else and post and say, hey, this was an awesome conversation to help make a difference for me today, and you need to listen to this. So appreciate your listening. As we always like to say, wishing you the very best and measuring your success. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Measure Success podcast. We'll see you again next time to learn from the best. Remember to subscribe now to get future episodes.